Hi, this is Kevin. Welcome to my tutorial on Chapter 11 of the Severance Python text. And we're going to be doing an exercise one. It's not one from the textbook. It's one that I've kind of dreamed up for you. And this is the tutorial one. Okay, so we want to begin by using a simple regular expression pattern. And I say the word regex. Well, sometimes I say regex, sometimes I say regex. So you're going to have to wait and see how I say it. But we're going to do a simple regex pattern. Okay? We're going to search through a text file, a multi-line text file, and we're going to be looking for a long but fairly simple string. It's the email address of the help desk at the iSchool at Illinois. And while we're doing that, and so we want to simply identify the matches. So we're going to use the search function instead of the find all function in the RE package. And we want to be counting some things. So we want to count the number of lines that contain the target string anywhere on the line. We want to count the number of lines that contain the target string at the beginning of the line, and the number of lines that contain the target string at the end of the line. Okay, it's just to loosen up. So let's get started. Okay, we want your basic structure for the program. So we're going to define a main, and I'm going to put pass in there so it's not going to complain about empty code. I'm going to have a call to main down here. I'm not going to hang it off of an if because we're only going to run this one possible way. We're only going to run this as a module that executes as a main. Okay, this isn't a two-purpose file. Okay, all right. So let's get started. Right. So what we've been doing pretty typically is start out by printing a polite kind of a message up front that says what the program does. So let's do that. Let's say print. And let's say count lines that contain the string help at support.ischool.illinois.edu in the input file. Okay, that's pretty good. We got ourselves a little bit more room here so it all fits in. Okay, and a lot of times when we're talking about a string, we put quotes around the string. And so what if we added quotes here? Well, problem is that quotes are being used in the string generally. And there are two approaches that I can take to that. One is I can use the escape character in front of the quotes that I want to contain in the string. And the other is I could have changed the outer enclosing character to an apostrophe. But I kind of like what I already did. So now we already have something we can test. We're going to test it. So let's give it a run. Count lines that contain the string help.support.ischool help at support.ischool.illinois.edu, just what we want in the input file. Very good. Okay, great. Well, that's working. Now we said we're going to have an input file, so let's do the standard things with that. Let's prompt for a file name. Okay, so I'm going to say in file name and I'm going to assign it the result from a prompt. So it's the input. Please enter the input file name and a colon and a space, like we've been doing all along. And then let us open that. So the variable that's going to point to the file object is just going to be called inFile. And let's do an open with the file name. Sorry, inFile name. And let's open that for reading. Okay. All right. Now, as long as I'm initializing things, it looks like I want to initialize counts. Okay, so I've got a count of lines that contain the target string anywhere, a count of lines that begin with the target string, a count of lines that end with the target string. So let's call them like this. Let's call the count of any lines that match let's call it raw line count. And of course, when we start, it's equal to 0. Okay. And the line count that we begin with it, let's just call it a line count begin. These are the ones that begin with the target string. Okay. And let's call the other one line count end. Okay. And this is a typical thing we do with a counter. All right. When we're doing our kind of initialization, or what some people might have called in my younger day housekeeping, we initialize the counters to 0. So now we want to go through the file in the most elegant way possible. And the most elegant way possible to read a text file is like this: for line in file. That's going to give us 2 at a line at a time. Okay? All right, now we want to start doing some testing with regular expressions and some bumping up counts. Okay, so if we're going to use search from the RE package, well, first of all, we're going to have to import that package. And it's not a package per se, it's a module. So let's say import RE. Okay? Let's got that taken care of. So now we can say for each line, if re.search, okay, and we're going to have to give it a pattern and a string to search. So the pattern's going to go in these. The pattern's going to go in the first string literal, okay, and the string that we're going to search, well, that's going to be the second argument or parameter, and that's just a line. Okay, so if we get a match there, we haven't put the pattern in yet, then what do we want to do? Well, we want to bump out raw line count. So let's say raw line count. And I think the best way to signal that you're bumping up by 1 is to use the plus equal shorthand and say plus equal 1. Okay? Okay, so if we just want to match a character string, any old place, well, we can just use that character string as the pattern. Just type the letters in literally to represent themselves, all the characters to represent themselves, and we're going to get we're going to match on that. So okay, so we've got this. Now we've got our first real test. Okay, if our overall counting is going to work. All right. Well, we need a test input file, don't we? Okay. So let's get back a little of the room that we did. I have now decided that that the test files, when we name them chapter 11 exercise blah 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 blah, I think they're too long. I was working with a student the other night, and she was testing her code for me, and just typing in the file names was just too laborious. So I've decided that we're going to use really obvious file names. So when I go to test your code, I'll go, oh, that's the file. Why? Because it has a really obvious name. So let's create a new file. And let's call this helpdesk input.txt, because we're looking for the help desk. We're looking for the address of the help desk. And I think that's going to be pretty clear. Okay. There we go. Okay, so let's get a look at this and see what kind of things that we want. Well, first of all, let's just go back and find that string. Let's not type that string any more times than we have to. So this is the string. We're going to copy it. Come back here to our test input. And what's the easiest case that we want to be able to find? Well, we want to be able to find our target string when it's on the line all by itself. Okay? All right, that makes sense. Now, what if it's not on the line all by itself? What if we've got a word before and a space, and then a string, and then a space, and a word after? Okay, well, we still want to find that, right? What if we have what if we have it embedded? So what if we embed it inside of the two words embed, one in the beginning and one word at the end? Okay, so it's not even separated by strings. Okay. What if we've got it several times on the same line? Okay, so let's put it once on the same line, another time on the same line, another time on the same line. Okay. Let's have one that starts with our string, but does not end with it. And I should have made this a little bigger so you guys could see it. And let's have one that starts with something else, but ends with our string. And let's make sure that the way that we write this, it's going to be okay with a blank line. It's not going to do anything bad with that. It's not going to croak. Of course, and we also want to check that if we give it an empty input file, it's not going to croak. But we won't do that with this file. Okay? All right, that looks good. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a Command S, or on Windows a Control S, to save. And you see, I see one more line number here, which means that it terminated the file for me. Okay, that's good. So helpdesk input.txt. Let's go back and run a test. So let's say, oh, I already don't like this because I wanted a blank line between my polite message and my prompt for the file name. So let's stop that by the stop button. And let's go up to the end of my polite message and put a \n, ask for a new line character, so it looks better. Okay? All right. So let's give it a run. See if that looks better. Yeah, that looks better to me. I like that. Okay. And what's the input file name? Well, help desk input text. Okay. Well, that's interesting. We never tried to print out anything. Well, of course, we're not going to know if we don't try to print out anything. All right. Let's try at the end here, after our for loop. Let's say we want to print. Okay. And then let's print out our raw line count. And then something that describes it a little better. Let's say that many lines in the file contain target string. Which does this say target string? Okay. Period. I kind of like that. Okay. So let's see what we get now. So let's give that a run again. Come down here. Help desk input text. 6 lines in the file contain the target string. Let's make sure that's what we should reasonably expect. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, not the blank, 5, 6. Well, looks like it was pretty good at that, even when it was embedded and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing is, we know that we're counting lines that qualify and not the number of times that it occurred, because we have line 4 has 3 of them, but it just counted that line 1 time. All right, so that's good. So let's go back and see what other thing we wanted to do. Well, then we have line count begin. So when we want to count all the lines to begin with the target string. Okay, now that should be pretty easy to do. Let's try to take code and clone it. Okay, so let's take this. Let's take the if test and clone it. And my one question for you here in terms of thinking is, should the second one be an if or an elif? And I'm going to argue that it should be an if, because a line can potentially be counted as any of these. Okay, so we don't want to make sure that we count it as the first one, but then don't consider it for the second and third counts. We want them all to be independent of each other. So we don't want any elif kind of stuff hanging around. Okay, so what do we want to check? Lines beginning with a target string. Well, of course, we remember from the class that it has a circumflex or a little hat symbol right in the beginning of the string. Okay, and instead of raw line count, it's going to be line count begin. Okay, that looks good. And now we're going to need another answer, another result, right? So we'll clone our result printing line. And let's, instead of raw line count, it's going to be line count begin. So let's fix that. Lines in file contain a target string at the beginning. All right, so that looks good. So it's usually helpful to predict what your output will be before you actually get it. So line 1, it qualifies 1, not line 2, not line 3. Line 4 does. So we're up to 2, not line 5. Line 6 does, but not line 7. So I think we're up to 3. 1, 2, 3. So I'm expecting to see 3 for the second count. Let's see what we get. Help desk input.text. Okay, so the first count was 6. The second count is 3. That looks good to me. Okay, and then we want to count the lines at the end of the string. So let's close this so we have a little more room. And let's do a little bit more cloning. Okay, so again, we want an if. We don't want an elif, because these tests are all independent of each other. Okay, and of course we don't want it to be line count begin, we want it to be line count end. Okay, and we don't want this to be at the beginning of the string, we want it to be the end of the string, which of course means it ends with a $sign, means it's right up against the string end. Okay, and then we're going to have to clone, and the second print line looks like the easiest to clone. So let's give that baby a clone. Okay, so again, we're going to want line count end. And at the end. Okay, so let's see how many occur at the end before we run the test. The reason it's good to predict before you run the test is that it's human nature to confirm that things work. So if you look at the output and then go, well, that's about right. A lot of people, they get a lot of false passes that way when they're doing it by inspection like we're doing here. So it's always better to look, okay, how many end with it? Well, 1, not that, 2, 3. Oh, well, that's good. We did a symmetrical job on the test data. So we're expecting 3 for the count at the end. Let's give it a run. Okay, help desk, input, text. It's a 3, so 6, 3, and 3. So this is a pretty simple thing, okay? But we've managed to do a number of skills, and that includes using the search function, which is going to give us, which can be queried to give us a true or a false. So if we get a match, we're going to get back a true. And looking for a literal string without any meta characters associated with it, adding the meta character in the beginning, which says I need that string to be at the beginning of the line, and adding the meta character at the end that says I need the string to occur at the end of the line, and then just a little good programming and testing, and we're all done. So that's it for this one. Your exercise is going to be of kind of similar difficulty. So good luck with that, and I'll see you on the next one.